He laughed, everyone laughed. A poor woman only wanted to check her balance. But when one number appeared on the screen, the entire bank went silent. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Ms. Love Stories channel, the place where love, drama, and unforgettable moments come alive. I'm so thrilled you're here, ready to dive into stories that will make your heart race, bring tears, and leave you believing in the power of love. Before we begin, I want to get to know all of you. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because in the next video, I'll give a special shout out to some of you amazing viewers from around the world. I can't wait to see how far our love story family reaches. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you never miss a single emotional journey. Get ready to feel, laugh, cry, and fall in love all over again, because every story we share here is for you. Now, the story begins. Rose. The glass doors of Riverstone National Bank hissed open as Elena Martinez, a thin woman in her late 30s, stepped inside. Her shoes were worn, her coat frayed at the sleeves, and her eyes carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who had spent far too long fighting battles no one saw. People moved around her with purpose: suits, heels, gold watches, cold perfumes. No one looked at her twice. Elena clutched her small brown purse to her chest like it was something fragile. Inside was all she owned: a prepaid phone with a cracked screen, $3 bills, a bus ticket, and her ATM card. She had not checked her balance in months. Not because she didn't want to, but because it terrified her. Today, though, she had no choice. Rent was late. Her landlord had given her one final warning. And the last job she had applied for hadn't called back. She swallowed hard. Please, just let there be something. At the entrance, a tall figure stood. Graham Stone, billionaire real estate mogul, CEO of Stonecore Holdings, and the kind of man who carried power like a second skin. His tailored suit was the color of storms, and his watch cost more than Elena's entire yearly earnings. He wasn't supposed to be here. Millionaires usually had private bankers, but he had come to handle an urgent transfer. Two worlds, under the same roof. One invisible, one untouchable, and fate was about to collide them. Elena stepped into the line. She was trembling, but she kept her chin high. She had promised herself long ago, never let them see you break. Two men behind her glanced at her coat and smirked. She probably has $2 to her name, one whispered. Elena pretended she didn't hear. When her turn finally came, she approached the teller, a young woman named Melissa, kind-eyed but visibly tired from a long shift. Hi, Elena whispered. I just want to check my balance, please. Melissa smiled politely. Of course. Card and ID. Elena handed them over with two shaking hands. Behind her, someone chuckled loudly. Graham Stone. He had overheard. Oh, come on, he said, loud enough for the room to hear. You need a teller just to check your balance? The customers in line turned. A few laughed. Elena froze. Graham continued. You know the ATM is free, right? Or do you just enjoy wasting people's time? Elena's cheeks burned red. I'm sorry, she murmured. Melissa frowned. Sir, please. But Graham wasn't finished. I bet her balance is less than what I tip my driver. This is ridiculous. The laughter around her grew. Elena tightened her jaw. Something inside her trembled. Humiliation, anger, grief. But she didn't lift her head. She couldn't afford to fight power. Not when she could barely afford bread. Melissa typed the account details. Elena squeezed her purse. Please, please. The screen loaded. Then Melissa's eyes widened. What? She whispered. Her jaw dropped. Her hands shook. Ma'am, this must be a mistake. Elena's heart stopped. Is it negative? No, Melissa breathed. It's not negative. Graham snorted. What, does she magically have $100? Melissa swallowed. Sir, you should stop talking. She turned the screen toward Elena, and the entire world went silent. Account balance. 1,474,320,000.23 Nigerian Nairas is almost equal to $1.2 million USD. Elena's breath vanished. People stared in shock. Even the security guard stepped closer, blinking hard. Graham's smirk collapsed. What kind of joke is this? He demanded. Melissa shook her head. There's no error. This is a legitimate government transfer. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. No, that's impossible. But she recognized the sender ID instantly. National Survivor Compensation Fund. Her husband, killed in a construction collapse 2 years ago, in a case covered up by Stonecore Holdings. She had fought for justice, filed complaints, visited offices, begged lawyers. No one helped her, until someone somewhere finally did. The room erupted in whispers. That poor woman? She's a millionaire? How? What? But Elena couldn't hear them. Her vision blurred with tears. Graham stumbled a step back. Survivor Compensation Fund. Construction collapse. 2 years ago. It all clicked. Both their lives were tied by the same tragedy. A tragedy his company had caused. And now the widow stood before him. The woman he had mocked. The woman whose husband died under his watch. His face turned the color of ash. Elena finally lifted her head. Her eyes were no longer filled with fear. They were filled with truth. You, she whispered. You laughed at me. Graham swallowed. Mrs. Martinez. I didn't know. You didn't care. The people around them went quiet. You mocked me, she said, voice trembling but strong. For checking my balance. You mocked a widow struggling to survive. You mocked the woman your company destroyed. Graham staggered backward as if struck. I can explain. No, she said. You can't. Elena didn't storm out. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She simply turned toward the stunned room and said softly, "This money will finally allow me to live. But dignity." She looked directly at Graham. That costs nothing. You should try having some. Then she walked away, past the line of silent customers, past the security guard with tears in his eyes, past the glass doors that no longer felt like barriers. Behind her, Graham Stone bowed his head. For the first time in his life, he felt shame. Graham Stone stood frozen inside Riverstone National Bank long after Elena walked out. People pretended to return to their business, but every pair of eyes lingered on him. The man who mocked a widow. The man whose company had caused a tragedy. The man who laughed until the screen exposed the truth. The shame sat like a stone in his stomach. His assistant, who had accompanied him, whispered urgently, "Sir, we need to leave. Now." Graham didn't move. His entire throat felt tight. He had insulted her. Humiliated her. Treated her like she was nothing. And she was the very woman his company owed everything to. After several long seconds, he turned and walked out of the bank in a slow, stunned trance. But outside, the world didn't give him space to breathe. A passerby, having filmed the incident, held up his phone and said, "You're going viral, Stone." Graham's blood went cold. By the time Graham reached his office in the top floor of Stonecore Tower, the video had already spread. It was raw, unedited, unforgiving. Graham laughing. Elena trembling. The screen showing the life-changing balance. The realization hitting him like thunder. Elena's words. Dignity costs nothing. You should try having some. Hundreds of comments. Then thousands. Millions. Hashtag Stonecore shame. Hashtag widow wins. Hashtag be kind. Graham threw his phone onto his desk and sank into his leather chair. His chest tightened. His temples throbbed. His breathing grew strained. He had handled scandals before. Accusations, lawsuits, exposés. But this was different. This wasn't about business. This was about humanity. And he had failed. A soft knock came from the door. His lawyer and lifelong friend, Daniel Fisher, walked in. He didn't smile. Didn't offer comfort. He simply set a thick manila folder on the desk. "You remember this?" Daniel asked. Graham stared blankly. Daniel opened the folder. Photos spilled out. The collapsed construction site. Injured workers. Emergency crews. And one body covered with a white sheet. Elena's husband. A good worker. A father. A man Graham never met, but whose death haunted the company's records. Graham felt the air leave his lungs. Daniel spoke quietly. "You never read the full report." "I didn't want to." "And that," Daniel said, "is the problem." Graham looked away. He had always told himself that tragedies were part of business. That accidents happened. That lawyers handled things. That compensation funds existed for a reason. But now it wasn't paperwork. Now it had a face. A voice. A woman with trembling hands and a wounded heart. Elena. Daniel's voice softened. You need to make this right. Graham whispered. I don't know where to start. Meanwhile, Elena Morales walked into the small apartment she had struggled to keep. The cracked paint. The dim light. The smell of damp walls. Everything looked the same. Yet nothing felt the same. She set her purse down and sat on the edge of her bed. She didn't cry, not yet. The shock had not fully settled. She touched the worn wedding ring on her finger. Carlos, she whispered to the empty room. We finally did it. They finally listened. For the first time in years, she felt something fragile. Something she feared to name. Hope. But then came the fear. What now? Money did not erase grief. It did not give her husband back. It did not erase the humiliation she endured. And the man who had humiliated her still walked free, wealthy, powerful, untouched. Her phone buzzed with message notifications. She ignored them all. Except one. From an unknown number. Ms. Morales, this is Daniel Fisher, legal counsel for Stonecore. Mr. Stone wishes to meet with you personally at your convenience. Elena stared at the screen. Her pulse quickened. Why would a man like him want to meet? To apologize? To offer more money? To silence her? She didn't know. But she knew one thing. She would not be intimidated again. She typed only one sentence. If he wants to speak to me, he can come to my neighborhood. And she sent the address. Her old, poor forgotten street. If Graham Stone wanted a conversation, he would have to leave his glass tower and face the world she lived in. Graham received the message while staring out his office window. Her address hit him like a punch to the gut. A rundown neighborhood. Crime-ridden. Forgotten by politicians. A place his company's wealth would never touch. Daniel read the message over his shoulder. You don't have to go, he warned. Yes, Graham said quietly. I do. Within an hour, Graham was sitting in the back of a black sedan as it drove through cracked streets and rusted buildings. People stared. Not with admiration, but with suspicion. When the car stopped in front of Elena's old brick building, Graham stepped out. A group of kids playing soccer paused. One of them whispered, "That's the guy from the video." Graham felt the sting. He climbed the stairs. Every step felt heavier. He reached the door of apartment 3B. He raised his hand. Knocked. A moment later, Elena opened the door. No makeup. No fear in her eyes. Just calm strength. Mr. Stone. Elena. The hallway was silent. She crossed her arms. Well, you wanted to talk. Graham swallowed hard. I'm here to apologize. Elena didn't blink. Then start talking. Graham took a deep breath, trying to find the words. I shouldn't have laughed. I shouldn't have humiliated you. In front of everyone. It was cruel and unnecessary. I let arrogance and pride blind me. Elena's gaze didn't waver. And you think that saying sorry is enough? She asked. You mocked me, a widow struggling to survive. You made me feel worthless in front of strangers. Graham swallowed hard. I know. I can't change what I did. But I want to make it right. Elena's heart raced. She wanted to believe him. But years of betrayal and neglect had taught her that words were cheap. How? She asked softly yet firmly. Graham looked down at his hands. By being honest. By facing the truth. About the accident, about my company. And about what happened to your husband. Her eyes narrowed. You're finally admitting the truth? Yes, he whispered, the weight of his guilt pressing on him like a physical force. I ignored it for too long. I ignored your suffering. But today, I can't hide anymore. Not from you. Not from myself. Elena stepped back, letting him inside. The apartment was small, cluttered, but cozy. It smelled faintly of lavender and worn furniture. The home of someone who had lived through hardship, but had not given up. Graham followed her cautiously, keeping his distance. I want you to understand, he began, his voice low and sincere. The accident, the collapse, it should never have happened. My company cut corners. We didn't follow safety protocols. Your husband. He was the hardest worker I've ever seen. And we failed him. And you. Elena's chest tightened. I know, she whispered. I've spent 2 years fighting alone. Trying to get anyone to care. Lawyers, politicians. Even your company. No one listened. Graham's voice cracked with emotion. I know. And I am ashamed. Every day I wake up, I think about him, about you. And what I could have done differently. I can't bring him back, but I want to do what's right. I want to help you live again, with dignity. Elena's hands trembled. You think an apology can fix everything? No, he admitted. Not words. But actions. I want to help you. I want to restore what was taken from you, as much as I can. Elena walked to the small window, looking out at the crumbling street. Her mind raced. She could feel the sincerity in his voice, the raw guilt that he carried. But could she trust him? Why now, she asked. Why come here after all this time? Graham looked down. Because I finally see you. Not as a poor woman. Not as someone beneath me. But as a person I wronged. And because, if I don't face this now, I never will. Her chest heaved. The years of struggle, the nights of crying alone, the constant worry, it all pressed down on her. She wanted justice. She wanted closure. She wanted respect. And she wanted the man who had caused so much pain to truly understand. She turned to him. Fine, she said, her voice steady. You want to make this right? Then you will face everything. No shortcuts. No excuses. Graham nodded, swallowing hard. I will. I promise. And in that small, humble apartment, 2 worlds collided. One, the wealthy man haunted by guilt. The other, the woman whose strength had been forged by tragedy. Graham stayed longer than he expected. They talked about the past. About Carlos, her husband, the accident, and the mistakes that should never have happened. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. Elena's voice was strong, yet filled with pain and heartbreak. And slowly, Graham began to understand the human cost of greed. He realized that money could never replace dignity, love, or life. When he left that evening, he didn't feel relief. He felt a responsibility heavier than any boardroom decision, any financial loss, any scandal. Elena watched him go. She didn't know if she could forgive him yet. But for the first time in years, she felt that justice, even partial, was possible. And the number of the past, the number that had been erased, ignored, hidden, would soon lead them both to a decision that would change everything. The next morning, Graham sat in his office, staring at the skyline beyond his tower. He had promised Elena he would take action. But promises were easy. Actions were harder. Daniel Fuentes, his lawyer and friend, leaned against the doorframe. You need to be careful, he warned. Any misstep, and this could blow up bigger than the video. Graham shook his head. This isn't about reputation anymore. It's about justice. Elena deserves that. Carlos deserves that. And I need to do what's right, no matter the cost. Daniel studied him for a long moment. You sure you're ready for that? You're not just apologizing. You're exposing the company. Every corner, every failure, every cover-up. Graham nodded slowly. I'm ready. For once, I need to face it. Elena had agreed, reluctantly, to meet Graham at the site of the accident. Her husband's last place of work. The site was a graveyard of unfinished concrete, twisted beams, and weeds overtaking the ruins. Workers whispered as they passed by, staring at the wealthy man walking beside the widow. This is where it all happened, Elena said quietly, her voice tight with emotion. Graham nodded, swallowing hard. I should have been here, he admitted. I should have stopped it. I should have been accountable from the start. Elena's eyes burned. You should have cared. You should have listened. You should have seen me. Graham fell silent, his guilt crashing down with the weight of her words. Over the next few days, Graham worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. Internal reports, hidden contracts, emails from supervisors who ignored safety violations, everything. He could feel Elena's presence in every file, every document. The widow who had been silenced for too long. When he presented the evidence to Elena, she studied it, her hands trembling. Every single one of these people, she whispered. Every person who let him die. Graham nodded. And they will be held accountable. Not just for the law, but for you. And for your husband. Elena's eyes softened slightly. For the first time in years, I feel like someone finally sees us. Graham scheduled a board meeting. He knew it would be brutal. Executives would resist, deny, and attempt to protect their interests. But he had changed. This time, he wasn't protecting himself. This time he was doing it for justice. As he stood in the boardroom, Elena beside him, he presented everything. Safety violations, the ignored warnings, the cost-cutting that led to tragedy, and the compensation owed to the victims' families. The room went silent. No one had expected the CEO to speak with such honesty. No one had expected him to admit the company's failures publicly. Elena watched Graham, surprised by his courage. She could see he was sincere. Not seeking praise, not seeking forgiveness, but finally doing the right thing. After the meeting, Graham turned to Elena. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quietly. "I just want to make sure no one else suffers like you did." Elena studied him for a long time. "Actions speak louder than words," she said. "And right now your actions are the only things that matter." He nodded, silently promising himself he would spend every day making up for the mistakes of the past. For Elena, it was the first glimmer of hope in years. A chance to rebuild her life, reclaim her dignity, and finally honor Carlos' memory. As they walked out of the office together, the city skyline glimmered in the distance. Two lives, once bound by tragedy, were now connected by purpose, justice, and the fragile beginnings of trust. And although the road ahead would be difficult, both of them knew one thing. Some numbers, like debts, losses, and lives, can never be erased. But some actions, like courage, honesty, and redemption, can change everything. The day of reckoning arrived. Elena sat in the conference room of Stonecore Holdings, her hands clenched in her lap. Executives she had never met glared at her, uncomfortable in her presence. They had underestimated her. And they would soon learn the price of underestimation. Graham Stone stood beside her, no longer the arrogant man from the bank. His presence carried accountability. He had prepared every document, every report, every shred of evidence that proved the negligence that cost Carlos his life. One executive, a tall man with a smug expression, spoke first. "Mr. Graham, we don't see the need to disclose every minor oversight in the construction files. That's internal protocol." Elena's voice rang out, cutting through the tension. "Minor oversight? That oversight killed my husband. That oversight destroyed families. Your protocol doesn't erase lives. It doesn't erase grief. And it doesn't erase justice." A hush fell over the room. Graham nodded toward her, letting her words resonate. He had let her speak. He knew this moment wasn't about him. It was about Elena, Carlos, and the countless others who had suffered in silence. The executives tried to resist. They whispered, argued, and attempted to sway Graham. But he would not falter. He presented the evidence methodically. Safety violations, ignored warnings, internal memos proving that corners were cut to save costs, and emails from employees pleading for inspections. "This is not about profit," Graham said firmly, his voice unwavering. "This is about accountability. This is about lives. And if my company cannot accept responsibility, I will ensure it does legally, ethically, and publicly." Elena watched the room transform from tension to silence. The executives, faced with undeniable evidence, could not deny their failures. Finally, the board voted unanimously. Immediate compensation for the victims' families. Structural and procedural reforms to prevent future disasters. Termination or accountability for those directly responsible for negligence. Elena felt a surge of relief, mixed with sorrow. Nothing would bring Carlos back, but finally justice had a voice. After the meeting, Graham and Elena stepped outside. The city lights reflected in her eyes, showing both pain and a glimmer of hope. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not for apologizing, but for making it right." Graham nodded. "I can't undo the past. I can't bring him back. But I will make sure no one else suffers like you did." Elena took a deep breath. "For the first time in years, I feel like I can move forward." He looked at her, realizing something profound. It wasn't wealth that mattered. It wasn't power. It was responsibility, honesty, and the courage to face mistakes. And in that moment, something shifted between them. A mutual respect, forged from tragedy and redemption. Elena returned to her apartment that evening, a sense of peace settling over her. Her small home still bore the marks of hardship, but her heart felt lighter. She no longer feared injustice. She no longer felt powerless. Graham, meanwhile, returned to his office, forever changed. The arrogance that had defined him for years had been replaced by humility. The man who once mocked a struggling widow now worked tirelessly to ensure his company honored its promises. Though their worlds were different, fate had intertwined their lives. And while the past could never be undone, the future offered a chance for healing, trust, and perhaps even something deeper. Elena smiled as she looked at a photo of Carlos on her shelf. She whispered, "We did it, love. Justice has a voice. And I can finally live." Graham, somewhere above the city, stared at the skyline, a quiet promise on his lips. "I will never let greed blind me again." For Elena and Graham, the road ahead was uncertain, but one truth remained. Some wounds can heal, some lives can be rebuilt, and some hearts can learn to forgive. And sometimes the smallest act of courage, like walking into a humble apartment and listening, can change everything. Elena woke up that morning in her modest apartment with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years. The sun streamed through the cracked window, illuminating the small space she had called home during her years of struggle. She took a deep breath. For the first time, she didn't feel defeated. She didn't feel invisible. The compensation from the company and the justice she had fought for gave her the freedom to start over. Not just financially, but emotionally. She made a small list. Find a new apartment. Take care of her health. Start a small business, something that could help her community. She smiled softly. After so long, hope was no longer a stranger. Meanwhile, Graham Stones walked through the hallways of Stone Core, but this time his presence was different. Employees noticed the change immediately. He no longer carried the air of arrogance or intimidation. Instead, he listened. He genuinely asked questions. He ensured safety procedures were enforced, and he personally checked on the well-being of workers on every project. Daniel Fuentes, watching from the sidelines, nodded. "You've changed," he said quietly. "Yes," Graham admitted. "And I have to. For Elena. For Carlos. For everyone who trusted me and was failed." The man who once laughed at a widow's struggle was now committed to justice, compassion, and responsibility. One afternoon, Elena invited Graham to see her new small business venture. A community center for women who had faced hardship, abuse, or loss. She wanted to turn her pain into purpose. As Graham walked into the center, he was struck by how vibrant and alive the space was. Women were learning skills, sharing stories, and helping each other. Elena turned to him, eyes shining. "This is just the beginning," she said. "For me and for everyone who's been overlooked." Graham felt a surge of pride, not for himself, but for her. "I see it, Elena," he said quietly. "And I want to help. Anything you need, I'll support." Her eyes met his, and for the first time there was no distance, no fear, just mutual respect and understanding. Even as their lives began to rebuild, the shadows of the past lingered. Elena and Graham decided to hold a private memorial at the construction site, honoring Carlos and all the workers affected. Elena spoke first, her voice steady, carrying both sorrow and strength. "Today we remember the lives lost, the sacrifices made, and the injustice that was ignored for too long. But we also honor resilience, courage, and the power of truth." Graham stepped forward, humbled. "I failed them. I failed you. And I promise, I will never fail again. We will ensure no family ever suffers like this again." Together, they placed flowers at the site, a symbolic gesture of closure and commitment to the future. Weeks passed. Elena's life stabilized. Her business grew slowly but steadily. Graham remained an ally, not controlling, not patronizing, but supportive. One evening, as they shared a quiet moment over coffee at her small apartment, Elena spoke softly. "I won't forget what happened. But I can forgive. Because I see your heart now, Graham." Graham looked at her, eyes glistening with gratitude. "Thank you, Elena. I don't take this lightly. Your forgiveness. It's more than I could ever deserve. For the first time, they were equals. Two souls scarred by the past, learning to heal together. The city lights twinkled outside the window as Elena and Graham sat in silence, letting the calm settle around them. Elena finally felt at peace. She had justice, dignity, and a renewed purpose. Graham had found humility, accountability, and a chance to redeem himself. They had been brought together by tragedy, but they were moving forward through truth, courage, and the small acts that rebuilt their lives. And though the road ahead was long, they knew one thing. Even the deepest wounds can heal. Even the heaviest burdens can be lifted. And sometimes the most unexpected encounters, like a millionaire facing a struggling widow, can change everything. Have you ever experienced injustice? How did you handle it? State in the comment section below. It may go a long way to encourage another person. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. Your time, your support, and your presence here mean more than words can say. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or kept you watching, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay blessed, stay strong, and keep believing in love. See you in the next story.